Welcome back to another episode of Dr. Paul's podcast. Today we have a very special guest. I'm very excited to introduce you to Amelia Friend, who, in addition to being a friend of the practice, she's an awesome macro coach and personal trainer. Thanks for coming on. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Love that intro.
Can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do and sort of what a macro coach is.
Yeah. So my name is Amelia Friend. That's literally my name. So my practice is called Friendly Muscles because I love helping people I help them with their nutrition. And I'm really big proponent for having muscles and getting stronger. I'm a personal trainer and a macro coach, which is nutrition.
Cool. And stay tuned. This is a really cool episode. We're doing it in two parts. So after we get through the nutrition stuff, and we're probably going to get a little bit nerdy and in the weeds with nutrition because that's one of my passions as well. We're actually going to move over to a video podcast, and we're going to go through some exercises. As a personal trainer and as a surgeon, we are going to go over post-op stuff. So after breast surgery, tummy surgery, arms, legs, general working out after a procedure. We're just going to talk you guys through how to do it safely and effectively, and you're going to get some awesome tips from Amelia on how to build muscle and get that toned look you're going for.
Yeah.
Cool deal. So we got a little bit into talking about macros, but let's just get into a macro coach. So a little bit new terminology for some folks, but just walk us through a day in the life of what you do on that side of things.
So macros is short for macronutrients, and that is what our food is made up of. So it's the protein, fat, carbohydrates, and combinations of those. And I love macros because it is what it is. Lots of, diets with rules and restrictions and cutting out things and demonizing them or weird names. And it's just truly what you're eating.
Yeah. Getting back to basics. I like that.
Totally.
So if somebody enlists your services and says, this sounds interesting, I'm intrigued, I want to get back to some basics of these building blocks and get a healthier lifestyle. What are some things that, as a macro coach, you find really important and that you like to know about your new clients?
So I try to dig pretty deep and find out a lot about them. I gather information, first of all, things like their age, height, current weight, what and how much they're currently eating, how much and what type of exercise they are doing, even things like their job, which can contribute to their lifestyle and how much movement they have. And then things like their personal health history, like PCOS, menopause, perimenopause, diabetes, things like that. And then, of course, we talk about their goals and what they want to do.
Yeah. Awesome. So pretty in-depth. There's a broad overview of sort of their natural habitat, if you will, but also diving into medical conditions, previous diets, what works and doesn't, and sort of their baseline nutrition, what they're currently eating and utilizing. That sort of stuff.
Yeah. And then from there, I provide them, with a lifting program and their cardio goals. We plan their nutrition, which includes periodizing it or phasing it, and setting their calorie goals, which includes protein, carbs, and fat targets.
We're going to dive into that one a little bit. Periodization of nutrition goals and diets.
We'll get there.
Those are exciting topics. Really excited to get into that. So let's start. I think most people have heard about, proteins, fats, carbs, alcohol too. But so from those macro standpoint, from like both a caloric and then also a nutritional standpoint, let's just talk about those a little bit. And then if you want to start with alcohol or just in general nutrition and calories.
Totally. So I want to start with calories first, because I think that's what people really know the most about, probably familiar with it, and might even have some fear or some shame or some like, oh, calories, we're afraid of them. But calories are units of energy. Like, scientifically, they are units of energy, and they're the fuel for our body's needs. We need them. It's not just eating calories just to burn them. We use the calories to breathe, to think, to blink, move, pump our heart and our blood. So they're important. And then they fall into the different categories. Calories do. They fall into proteins, carbs, and fats. And we call the alcohol the fourth macro. It's a fourth macro.
It's a sneaky one. Yep.
It's a sneaky one. And it gets that nickname because there's like negligible nutritional value, but it does contain calories. And just because it doesn't provide nutrition doesn't mean we don't enjoy it. Yep. And that we can't enjoy it. It can work against your body goals. So I just always help them, encourage them to like find moderation and not drink just to drink, maybe dial in why they're doing it and having awareness and use it for celebrating. But every single night is not a celebration.
Sure. Very true. It's also on the spectrum of calories, it almost gram for gram, it'd be better to binge on carbs than alcohol, just because it's almost twice the amount of calories that you get from alcohol than a carbohydrate. And then, protein's the same. It's actually closer to fat from a caloric intake, 7 compared to 9, rather than some of the more fundamental building blocks like proteins. So definitely agree with that. Sneaky, enjoy it, in moderation, but a daily intake or even, a couple times a week can definitely add up over the course of a year. It's a lot of extra calories that aren't.
Yeah. And, it can, if you think about after you've had some alcohol in your system, you can be more lethargic and groggy. That can affect your ability to think and to make good nutritional choices too. So
in there, yep, to couple beverages, right? And suddenly it's time to order Domino's or get something.
Right. Yeah. Just leads into, more poor decisions sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that's alcohol, and then protein. Let's jump into that one. Okay,
I love protein. Protein is necessary for the growth and repair of tissues, especially muscle, and it helps also with production of enzymes and hormones. Consuming enough protein will prevent the body from using muscle tissue as fuel, and that's really important when we're trying to lose weight. So eating enough protein helps us maintain the muscle that we have so that we can target fat loss.
Yep. I think protein is one of those understated things. It ends up as part of our diets almost incidentally. Like you just assume, well, you have to have something with, dinner. There's a meat and some starches and some other stuff. But I definitely love focusing on that, not only just generally in protein, but clean protein, lean protein. I'm trying to get stuff in your body that actually makes sense rather than just kind of going with what's available.
Yeah. And one thing that's really cool about protein, which we will talk about later too, is just protein takes more calories to burn. And so it helps with our metabolism actually.
Yeah, absolutely. So that leaves fats and carbs. So let's hear a little bit about fats.
Fats and carbs. People are a little bit afraid of those sometimes, but they all play a role. So fats produce and regulate hormones. And then, so that helps with reproductive health, female menstrual cycles, also provides energy and protects our vital organs. And it fuels the brain and helps us with satiety, which is like feeling fuller.
Yeah, absolutely. Healthy fats can be super important for feeling full. Absolutely. Yes. I love that. Especially, we'll jump into the GLPs in a little bit, but anytime you have something going on in your body that's supposed to help you decrease your caloric intake, whether that's any of the glutides or something else, gastric bypass surgery, if there's something you've done to try and make yourself feel full, one of the ways to accentuate that a little bit is get a handful of nuts or some avocado, or get something that's got a little bit more olive oil in it, and suddenly you feel very full very quickly. And it's a great way to hit the pause button on the munchies and just feel, whoops, I'm done, don't have to eat anymore.
Totally. Yeah.
Cool. And then our good friend, the carbs.
I love my carbs. So it's the body's preferred source of energy. And our brain, our muscles, our nervous system use carbs for fuel. And carbs directly impact our T3 and T4 hormones, which are important in thyroid function. So there's a lot of carbs out there. but there's also more quality. I mean, I think that people can agree that like there are some foods that are more nutritious than others, but that doesn't make other foods bad. So it doesn't make carbs bad just because they exist, but we can choose more often more quality sources of carbs.
Yeah, which kind of leads right into the next thing we wanted to talk about is fad
Mhm.
diets. Because suddenly, so you get a label on something, carb equals bad, and suddenly you are, Atkins or you're working on keto, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that
Yeah.
work really well for some people, and for other people, it just doesn't matter what diet you've been on. You just kind of go through the cycle. You're these chronic dieters that are just coming back and forth, trying new things. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, and there's can be a lot
Yeah.
of frustration there instead of getting back to some fundamentals. Um, but in addition to, well, essentially all diets fall into you're either restricting the calories by limiting certain foods or shrinking down the eating window, like with these, overnight fasts and, 16-hour fasting periods and all this other
Yeah.
stuff. But thoughts on diets in general and getting back to some basics there?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not against dieting. I'm for smart dieting. And what I mean by that is just the fad diets and the ones with the names, their goal is just to have you in a caloric deficit, which is what you need to be in to lose weight. And they just do that a lot of times by singling out foods, making you afraid of them and demonizing them even sometimes, or just like severely restricting your caloric intake.
Mhm.
And my goal with my clients is sustainable fat loss. So I don't want you to just be able to like lose a bunch of weight. I want you to be able to keep it off. And sometimes that means it's a little slower and it is a little more basic, but I would rather spend the time and like have it gone. And that's what I want for my clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And low and slow wins the race almost every time. Don't focus on a pound a week or 2 pounds a week, like do a pound a month, or maybe even not even do a pound a month, but just get a body composition scale. And maybe you swap out some visceral fat for some lean muscle mass over a month. That's a big win as opposed to
Yeah.
just I didn't lose any weight, but you've got better muscle mass, better tone. You're going to be, generally more fit and athletic and have less frailty when you get older. So
Yeah.
that's all super, super, super important.
And almost even like mentally too, like because these foods can get like carbs and fats, especially, they're just readily available. So they can kind of get a bad reputation. And I like to sometimes say that I feel bad for them. All they do is be good.
Yeah.
Um, they're just more abundant in our life. It takes some planning. You're not accidentally going to eat enough protein and get more quality sources of food. And even, I mean, I've read this great book called Salt, Sugar, Fat, and it talks about the work and the investment and time that companies put in to like make their food more like highly palatable, so that you keep wanting to eat it. It's
Yeah.
really interesting stuff. And I mean, listen, I can throw down on some food. I enjoy eating, but like I love the freedom that I have of just knowing what I'm eating and not having so many like rules attached to it. So my main objectives with my clients like is probably two things. One, aiming for 80 to 90% of whole foods.
Hmm.
And then when seeking like body goals, whether that's weight loss or body composition, to periodize their nutrition phases, which I know we're going to talk about.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, for sure. Totally agree. That's great stuff. I love dialing up protein intake. I think that's super important. Generally, I think Americans on the standard American diet or SAD, which is very aptly named, and end up with so much processed stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My personal care primary doc, we focus a lot on health span, and he always says anything in a box, a bag, or a can. Trying to avoid that. You want something that was, grown or eats things that were grown. Like that should be primarily your diet.
Yeah.
Just because you'll just overall you can ignore so many of the other things if you just get back to that real
Yeah.
simple way of eating.
Yeah. Of course, I agree. My definition of whole foods, you kind of basically said it, is foods that grew from the earth or lived on the earth. Some people might know that as like clean eating, and I'm good for clean eating. Yeah, shopping the perimeter of the grocery store, things like that, more produce. Um, and I'm for less processed food, but I'm not giving it all up. So I love having, some flexibility and knowing like, you know, I usually live kind of by 80-20 or even sometimes like more 90-10, something like that. But I do have this good example of whole foods, which would be like if you were at the end of the day and your sink is full of, dishes and you're washing the dishes and there's some like leftover food that gets in the sink. You think of like seeing a little piece of meat or a strawberry or a potato or corn. They have been sitting there in the sink, absorbing some water probably, and they still look the same.
Oh yeah. Yep.
But opposed to maybe like some Cheez-Its or some cereal, they've like expanded and they've turned into mush. And so that just is like, those are whole foods and they take more, again, with our thermic effective food to like break down for our bodies.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to dive into all the healthy stuff, but what's one of the guilty pleasures? What's something that you kind of go to when you need a little break?
Well, right now I've been loving my Girl Scout cookies.
In order. All right, on 3, what's your favorite Girl Scout cookie? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Samoa. I don't know why people bother with the other ones.
Seriously. Maybe a Thin Mint. I have been I've been making these creamies. I don't know if you've seen those things, the ice creams, protein ice creams, but those are pretty good in there.
We'll do another 80-20 rule. Your Girl Scout cookies can be 80% Samoas and 20% Thin Mints, and that's acceptable.
There you go.
All right, so we talked about periodization a couple times, and it's actually something that I've been using a fair amount with my weight loss patients, semaglutide, tirzepatide patients. But there's phases, and it's important. So let's kind of dive into the different aspects of that and how we can use that to really give ourselves the tools that we need.
Yeah, and I love that you've heard of that. The topic of nutritional periodization is really not super well known, but when people like have it explained to them, it's like, oh, that makes sense. And in some ways it can make, if you have, a bigger weight loss goal, it can make it actually seem less daunting, I think. So to me, I like to think about like professional athletes. No matter the sport, they have a training season where they're getting ready and they're getting amped up. And the running drills and stuff, they have their in season where they are performing at their highest level. And then they have an off season where they're a little more casual and flexible with their sport and with their lifestyle. I'm no professional athlete, but I can totally fit into that too. Like I have a body and I want to take good care of it. And so I don't want to be running it into the ground all the time, asking too much of it. So within nutrition, our phases are maintenance, a dieting phase, reverse dieting, and then an optional building phase, aka a bulk.
Those are great. So let's start with we could just go in that order. Okay. I think that makes sense. We'll just start with maintenance and talk about the baseline.
Yeah. Maintenance is where your energy output and your input are balanced. There can be a lot of body composition changes even in a maintenance phase. You're not actively chasing weight loss, but you can be increasing the ratios of muscle to fat. So you can even be like creating changes in your body. There is a little bit more flexibility here within your food and your calories, because you can see like positive changes and feel good in your body because your needs are being met. The energy input and output are matching. And this is where we really want to spend the most of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And then so we're going to come out of maintenance and we've decided we're going to make some changes and we get around to a dieting phase. Let's talk a little bit about that one.
Yes, a dieting phase. And this is also sometimes known as a cut. So we're actively cutting away some of like the fat from our body. And then we are targeting fat loss, and that's always done through a caloric deficit. So you're eating less than what your body requires. Exercise can play a part in here, but it's really nutritionally driven. Dieting is a stress on your body. Maybe you don't want to accept that. but it is a stress on your body because you're intentionally eating less than what your body needs to function. And so we want to keep those periods like short and to the point. We don't want to go super low. Like a modest deficit can do the trick. And when we slash too low, that can just be bad news and honestly can set us up for like more weight regain.
Yep. And I think that probably those two make intuitive sense for most folks. They're either not dieting or dieting. But then once we start getting into the other ones, like reverse dieting, that maybe that doesn't even make sense. Are you actively trying not to be on a diet? Let's talk about reverse dieting.
Yeah. So reverse dieting is used in two different ways. The first one is, okay, you've been in a dieting phase, like you've actively been like, okay, I'm going to be in this diet for 16 weeks or whatever that may be, a shorter phase. And then you kind of just bring up your calories, not like super slow, but we're not just going to like totally jump back and add 400 calories to our diet. We're going to just kind of let our body kind of adjust and come back to a maintenance level. And then the second way that we're using a lot more these days is in people who have been dieting or under eating for long periods of time. So remember, dieting is like eating less. It's in a deficit. Mm-hmm. And then the problem with that is our bodies are smart and they're primally like wired. And so they adapt to what we've been giving it. And we're eating less. And then our body's like, okay, we're not going to get as much energy. So like, we got to figure out how to work and like survival with less. And so our body like figures out how to conserve less energy. You can't just keep dropping and dropping and dropping. At some point, you're just like, it's not going to be good and things are going to fall off. So I compare it often to a company. When a company is thriving and it has enough money coming in to pay its employees and keep departments intact, pay to keep the lights on, that is the company's thriving. And when a company isn't making as much money, maybe it has a bad, quarter or whatever, it can last for a while. But if it continues to not turn a profit, it will eventually have to let some people go, let a department go. And so it is with our bodies too. So when we keep like dropping food, giving it less and less, it'll have to figure out how to operate with less energy and what departments it can eliminate. And a lot of times, the first ones that go are like our hormones, our sex hormones, drops in metabolism. Mm-hmm. You don't want those.
No, it's the opposite. You wanted to look better, feel better, enjoy life, and instead everything kind of tanks. And, the body, I'm going to jump into building in a second, but just as an aside, the body is so smart, like you're talking about. They're, normal cells. It's not even just your brain deciding what you're not eating. They're starting to do research into even cancer cells where your normal cells get that memo and they say, hey, there's less calories, so eat less and use less energy. And you can use that the cancer cells are still growing out of proportion, and you can specifically start targeting those because of their metabolism and because they are just churning right away. And so diet in, I think, cancer patients is going to become a pretty hot topic over the next decade or so, where we're looking at very specific ways to take care of the whole body while, working on starving other cancer cells or getting within like a cyclical, here's a boost of glucose, and you can team that up with chemotherapy or radiation to really work on some of that stuff. So cool stuff ahead there somewhere. But let's talk about building. You mentioned as bulking. Mm-hmm. That's not necessarily something that everybody thinks of as kind of a necessary part of staying toned or, so.
Yeah. So it's definitely an optional phase. Sometimes people who have been into lifting weights for a long time, they want to go this route. And it's, again, kind of like a dieting phase where we don't want it to be super long. It is also sometimes called bulking, but that is scary. It really is just what it is purposely eating in a surplus. And it's the best way to speed up the process of muscle growth. I mean, you think about you're growing something, you can't just starve it. You have to feed it something, a plant, a baby. You can't just starve it for it to grow. So if you want more muscle to grow, you're going to have to feed it.
Yeah. I've kind of covered a couple of great things so far, but if we're going to sum up like a few essential parts of all of that stuff, if you had like just a couple sentences, a couple bullet points that you want to pass along to everybody, what would that be to just try and help them with both their functional and health span and nutrition?
Yeah. Um, I'm kind of a broken record sometimes, but eating enough protein, eating enough food, mostly whole foods, lifting weights, which I know we're going to really talk about more in the second episode, so stay tuned. Lowering stress, going for a walk, getting enough sleep, and keeping alcohol in check.
Yep. So that's a way to live a long time and have a pretty good health span and stay pretty healthy.
Yeah. I mean, it's not flashy, and it's not really like congruent with the world that we live in.
That's true. If you want an immediate diet, an immediate result, and not to have any, long-term side effects of that. But even diets themselves, sometimes these crash diets can end up doing more harm than good long-term. So, so we are, it's probably the third or fourth time we've talked about protein, but let's dive a little bit more into that. So from my standpoint, those patients generally they're pre-op and we need to get them ready for a surgery. So I'll encourage most folks to, either get a protein supplement, take a multivitamin, make sure they're getting like a very reasonable daily recommended intake of protein. And then post-op, especially sometimes with the protein shakes or getting through that recovery. But for just average folks, they don't have a surgery coming up and they're not recovering from one. Let's talk a little bit about protein and why it's so important.
Oh, yeah. I think everyone could benefit from it, wherever they're starting at. Lots of benefits. One of the really cool things to me is that when we're eating enough protein and when we're pairing it with resistance, we are sending signals to our body to hold on to our muscle mass. Like everyone, regardless of whether you've been lifting weights before or, you might have a larger amount of weight that you want to lose, you have muscle mass at your core. And we want to get to some of that so we can see that's the toned look that people want, is seeing muscle.
Yep.
So we want to send those muscles to hang on to, or we want to send those messages to hang on to the muscle and get rid of fat. And when we prioritize eating more protein, we actually can boost our metabolism due to the thermic effect. So it takes more calories to burn and break down protein, helps us stay fuller longer. We're not feeling as hungry. And that's huge for patients coming to you to prepare for surgery, helps them keep their appetite kind of more in check so that they can be able to lose some of those, that weight that you want them to as they're coming to you for the rest.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great starting point for that. Truly just like getting back to a really fundamental, here is the building block of life. Inside of each and every one of your cells, there's tons of protein that's used for cell signaling and making DNA and all that other stuff, which is great. So for the average person, if they've been listening to this, like, okay, well, probably I don't get enough protein. What would be your recommendation for somebody just like a good maintenance?
Yes. So a calculation that I use is about 0.8 to 1.2 grams of protein per pound of body weight that you weigh. Someone who might fall into the overweight category, we might target more like a goal weight-ish at least. I mean, you don't really probably want to eat 250 grams of protein. That's quite a bit.
You feel full.
So we can set that up towards that goal weight. So for example, like someone who's 150 pounds, we could maybe be targeting between 120 to 180 grams of protein per day. So just that calculation. For someone who is just getting started, I mean, I would say try to work up to 100 grams a day. That is a great place to start.
Yeah. And it's once you start getting into that and trying to build muscle and getting up to that 1.4, 1.5, 1.8 and burn surgery when your body's really needs this massive amount of protein to recover, we even get up into like the 2 range. But for this basic, it may seem like an easy number to get right off the bat. Sure, try and go for that. It can definitely be tricky to get all that in, and you'll find yourself even upwards of 120 grams of protein a day. Like you just feel full a lot because you have to kind of eat every couple of hours. You have to go for snacks. You have to get the protein in. What are some ways that you kind of incorporate that in, like easier ways to try and get that in your diet?
So first off, I would take your goal and divide it by how many times that you're eating per day. Like if you're eating 3 meals, or if you're eating 3 meals and a snack, that will help you be able to like make it more manageable little targets. Any way that you can really kind of sneak it in. So I kind of like to have my clients like make it a game. Like, how can they get a little bit more? So maybe it's adding, they're eating 3 ounces of meat. Well, let's make it 4 ounces. And just every little bit adds up. Maybe you're wanting to have noodles or pasta. How can you add some chicken to it? And sometimes people put like mixed cottage cheese in, or Greek yogurt in with like the sauce, any little sneaky little things like that. And just 4 examples out here. So lean meat sources would be like chicken, turkey, shrimp, whitefish, lean ground beef. And then I really do like Greek yogurt and cottage cheese as well.
Yeah, those are great. That's interesting. Yeah, trying to get that in little bits here and there and get creative with it. Sometimes it's not a total different diet change. It's not, well, now I have to eat nothing but grilled chicken and vegetables. Like, no,
Oh, no.
take what you're normally eating and just kind of nudge it in the right direction over a couple
Oh,
weeks.
yeah.
It's that's easy to get to for sure.
I am out if it's just grilled chicken and broccoli for the rest of my life. I mean, I like broccoli and I like grilled chicken, but
Yeah, after the third meal,
that's it. I'm not it.
not it. So we're talking a lot about protein and what that can do for metabolism, and some of the reasons our metabolism drops, like prolonged dieting. Your body enters a starvation, big caloric deficit, then your cells, your brain, your stomach, very smart, and they just pump the brakes and say, "There's less coming in. We need to use less."
Yeah.
So those are maybe some of the more obvious ones, but what would be some of the things that you could think of that you wouldn't recognize, and suddenly your metabolism keeps going down, you're gaining weight, and you didn't even realize that you're doing something wrong?
Yeah, I would say stress is probably one that people don't relate, because they think it's got to be exercise or my food. Like that's it. I have to slash calories or I have to exercise more. But both of those are stress to the body. So we don't realize how much stress can do that. And stress can also come from like not getting enough sleep, over exercising, and that prolonged eating, under eating. That's stressful to the body. And we might not feel like like we're stressed. We're like, oh, we're fine. But our body is like, what are we going to do here? We do not have energy here.
Yeah. No, that is a tough one to come back from, especially you get the double hit of people who stress eat, where it's like, not only are you stressed out and your metabolism isn't going to do good things with the calories you're taking in, but also you're going to want to eat more. And so you're getting more calories than need, and your body's it's not going to metabolize the stuff that you've been getting already. So that's definitely a bad one to come in there for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's part of why I like when we are periodizing people's nutrition, we look at like, okay, what do we have a lot of things going on? Like, is our work if this is the busiest time of work for me, this is not going to be the time that we're going to want to diet. Or if we have, maybe everyone in your family has a birthday in March, we're not going to set up a diet phase in March, because you're just going to be more stressed and it's going to make it harder. Your body's going to be like working against you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely choosing when it's time to add muscle, cut fat, be in that maintenance mode, super important. And we've talked about bulking up a couple times. I think that's the word bulking up. A lot of my clients, I think people in general sometimes don't really want to have a certain look where they look like a big weightlifter, but it's certainly important to add muscle and to add lean muscle mass. So what would your advice be to somebody who's thinking, okay, well, I do want to be healthier and have better muscle mass, but I don't necessarily want to look like a bodybuilder?
Totally. It's like so valid. And I mean, I've even considered like doing a bikini competition at some point, but that is a whole other set of dedication. I'm not even sure if I want to do that. But all people, especially women, they should care about muscle. I mean, a lot of people are saying they want to be toned. Tone is muscle. And starting at age 30, the body, especially for women, naturally starts to lose 3 to 5 or even 8% sometimes of its muscle mass. That helps. I mean, less muscle mass means you burn less. You have less mobility. You're weaker. And when we work against that and like work to keep the muscle we have and build a little bit more, we see lots of benefits. And then keep in mind that like women, they're afraid of that word bulk, but we have like men have like 7 times more testosterone than us. And so it's really, really hard unless you're taking like some sort of, steroid or something to actually get like really bulky.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then we touched on this a little bit, but there's this misconception sometimes, well, I'm going to, bulk up and then the muscle turns to fat. That's not true. Muscle cannot get turned to fat. But one of the things that the muscle does do that's actually great is boosting the metabolism. So that's a great way to do that, where you can just add on that bulk, your basal metabolic rate comes up, and next thing you know, it can be a little bit easier to maintain. And there's a lot of other benefits that come along with that as well.
Yes. You hit the nail on the head. It's not your muscle tissue is muscle tissue. It's not going to turn into fat.
Yeah.
If you're thinking that you're bulky, you probably have put on muscle, but you still have more fat than you want. When you can work on, you build that muscle and then you go into a dieting phase, you can pull away the fat and you'll be able to see more of the muscle.
Yeah. Let's see. Any other, besides adding the metabolic rate and kind of helping you trim down a little bit, do you talk to other folks about like the longer term benefits of having lean muscle mass and increasing metabolism?
Yes, because it's not just about the aesthetics of it. I mean, I personally like the look of a good amount of muscle, but so to some of those clients, like you mentioned, some of your patients who are like, I'm afraid of muscle. It again, like you mentioned, it helps you burn more. Like muscle is more metabolically expensive, so it burns more at rest. It increases your bone density, which is important when you're getting older. It helps with your osteoporosis and overall bone health. Same with joints. Lengthening or strengthening the muscles around the joints can alleviate a lot of stress on the joints. And like those, so we don't just age and just like shrivel up. we can stay strong and we're less like dependent on other people as we age.
Yeah, stay a grape, don't become a raisin. You gotta.
Yeah, a raisin.
So we have when we go through metabolism, and there's sort of these little things that have been coming in and becoming a lot more popular. The GLP-1s, and I use those in my practice. Semaglutide, tirzepatide, and the Wegovy, Ozempic. So I use them either as pre or post-op to help folks with getting rid of visceral fat, building lean muscle, and I utilize some periodization with that as well. So once they're on it, we'll alternate a couple weeks on, a couple weeks off, so that they can be just in a chemically induced cutting phase, dieting phase, and just really focusing on whole, nutritious foods during that time. And then as they rotate off, kind of do that reverse dieting, kind of adding back more calories, but smart calories and protein and whole foods, dialing up the intake, and then hitting the gym hard for a couple weeks. And then we kind of transition back. So you can get this really nice cyclical move so that you don't have a lot of the problems that some folks are having with the sarcopenia, losing muscle mass if they've been on these GLPs for a long time. But I don't know that a whole lot of people know like how they work inside of the body. Just from a nutrition coach standpoint, how would you describe that to somebody if they bring that up and said they're thinking about starting it?
Yeah, big topic these days. So when we so this is kind of how it works. When we eat food, our body has a natural hormone, like a natural hormonal response to eating things. There are different hormones in our body that create as a result of the different foods we eat. And that affects the way our brain processes our food signals. So the stomach and the GI tract, they release a class of hormones called incretins. These molecules have a number of different effects. One of the messages it sends to the brain is we're full, we don't need any more food. And that slows down the stomach and the intestine so the body can process and digest the food. And it will make the pancreas get ready to secrete the hormones to digest. So that's the natural mechanism that semaglutides target. They stimulate that receptor that incretins work on, the GLP, and the drug activates that pathway, telling the body that it's full. So it's just kind of replicating that signal, so that you can be able to kind of like be like, okay, I'm not going to focus on food. I'm not feeling as hungry, which is really helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are even just like the name GLP, glucagon like peptide. Glucagon naturally occurring in the body, something that just really helps with metabolism and kind of comes on the positive side of things, not the starvation side, but the, hey, things are good and we're pretty full and we're pretty happy, and we could even put some stuff to the side if we need to. And if that is the your baseline state of hormone and going through your body, that's the receptors that are getting stimulated. Super helpful, just to, like you said, feel full and not have to worry about that. A lot of the folks that have been treating actually drop down to like a 2 meal a day program.
Mm-hmm.
So then you do get that sort of the 1 meal a day diet and those other things. You get some of those benefits of the intermittent fasting. But one of the things I hear over and over again is it's very liberating just to think about it less and just to say, well, I don't have to plan out a breakfast, lunch, snack, dinner, dessert. I'm just going to have something late morning and it's going to be pretty healthy. And I have something early evening and it can be pretty healthy. I'm going to be full all day. So it's also, gosh, everybody got super DoorDash heavy and a lot of delivery and a lot of fees. People are saving hundreds of dollars a month just like not having to eat and order out and go out and all this other stuff quite so much. So that's, I guess, just another benefit of getting healthy with that. So
yeah, kind of cuts out a lot of that like food chatter that you have, like especially for, again, those patients that are, they have maybe a significant amount of weight to lose and like they feel hungry, but they're like have this guilt and the shame of like, well, I shouldn't be eating because I need to lose weight. And they're just kind of having this like internal battle and conversation with themselves. And they can just be like, it kind of gets that hunger part out for now so they can be able to spend some time losing some weight.
Yeah. And, it probably also helps a marriage too. So you have to ask, what's for dinner, Les? What do you feel like? Anything specific? No, if you're both just not really hungry, it's just, okay, we'll just, we'll do a little snack. That's great. So everything, there's pros and cons with everything. GLPs, I think that they are very reasonable to have some great effects for heart attack, stroke risk, kidney protective, get your A1C down, help you lose weight. Blood pressure, obviously diabetes during that drug class. But I have about 5 pages of info, 2 of which are specifically just going over side effects, adverse reactions of the medications. And most of them aren't severe, some nausea, feeling very full, diarrhea, constipation, those sorts of things. But I don't think they're for everyone. And I don't really feel strongly about pushing those, prescribing those, if somebody's has a moderate, mild to moderate amount of weight loss. So if somebody came to you and they said, hey, I just want to get down 10 pounds and tone up a little bit, is that something you'd say, we've got a medication for that, or would you go a different route?
For a small amount like that, I would probably say, no, let's not do that. But am I for the GLPs and using the semaglutides? Surprisingly, yes. I mean, I am a nutritionist and I am a macro coach and a personal trainer, and I believe in all those things. But I mean, I totally understand needing some of that momentum to help you get going. What I would focus on, like, I'm happy to work with clients and patients who are on a GLP, but we would work on developing all these habits that we've been talking about and really hitting hard protein again, so that as you're losing weight, it's not just like everything's on the table. It's like, we're going to hang on to our muscle. We really are going to get rid of this fat. And I would say I'm for it, but I think you need to have a little bit of accountability and someone helping you and coaching you through, someone like myself, perhaps.
Yeah, I love that because I don't. I think there's going to be the pendulum's going to swing the other way at some point, and it's going to be everybody was on these medications and they ended up losing a bunch of lean muscle, and they lost the weight, but then they gained the weight back, and they lost the muscle, and they didn't gain the muscle back. So now you're in this awkward position of you started heavy with a reasonable muscle mass, you lost weight, but you lost more muscle, and now your weight's coming back. So I absolutely agree with working with somebody. Nutrition trainers, while you're on the medications, doing it in a cyclical thing that makes sense. So that for me, it's every 2 to 3 weeks. You come off the medication, what your metabolism is going to be like when you're done. So it's not I lost 30 pounds and then I came off the medication and I gained 30 pounds. It was over a year, I lost 20 pounds and I stayed with 20 pounds, lighter and kept muscle in the process. So that is a great way to think about that. I think we're probably gonna get a little bit too much in the weeds and nerdy here, but I want to do it anyway. So
Let's get nerdy.
let's do it. So metabolic rate, you can even hop on a scale or do a calculation based on your height, weight, gender, what your basal metabolic rate is. And a lot of folks, it's that, you put in your food calculator, food diary, Weight Watchers, and you come up with, this is how many calories I'm eating based on my height and weight. This is my basal metabolic rate. So I'm going to gain or lose weight based off of that. But it's more complicated than that. And it definitely can get a little bit more tricky and nuanced. So from the macro coach, nutritionist, let's hear your other thoughts about what goes into gaining and losing weight, not just those two things.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of cool that it is so tricky because we're not robots. Our bodies are so smart. And so it's kind of a cool thing, but it also is like, it's kind of hard to pinpoint everything sometimes. So, okay, as I mentioned before, like the purpose of calories is not just to ingest them, just to burn them off. And we're using them. Our body is using them. Some people can like really get obsessed with like that calorie burn and, chain themselves to a treadmill until they hit a certain number. And it's like, well, your body, those are kind of, the accuracy of those readers are not the best anyways, but like what a terrible place mentally to be, to just think I ate this much, I have to burn it all off. I have to eat this much, I have to burn it all off. So we actually, I think of like a pie chart, and I can't show you one exactly, but like a pie chart, that makes up your total daily energy expenditure. So all of the ways that we're using our calories, and there's 4 different ways within that pie chart. The biggest one, the biggest piece of that chart is by far the BMR. So we have BMR. Here's our science right here, our EAT, our TEF, and our NEAT, which I'm going to talk about all of those. So the biggest part is that BMR, and it's a roughly 70%. Again, we're not robots, so we can't exactly target that, but that's a big piece of the pie. 70% is your BMR, your basal metabolic rate. And that is what you would burn just like laying in bed. Again, thinking, blinking your eyes, swallowing, your heart pumping, blood flowing through your body, blinking your eyes, little things like that, they all take calories. And that's a big part of it. And of course, your muscle mass just existing is part of that too. And then, so EAT stands for exercise activity thermogenesis. So that is your exercise. And that's what people think is like, oh, this is what I'm burning. But it's actually a significantly smaller chunk of the pie. It's somewhere between like 5 up to maybe 15%. 15% at the most of your calorie burn actually comes from your dedicated exercise. So people get real lost in the weeds on that and, looking at their devices and like, oh, I burned this many calories, but it's a smaller part of like the whole thing.
Yeah.
TEF, which I did mention, which is the thermic effect of food, that's probably about 5 to 10% of the pie, and that is breaking down our food. It takes calories to burn it down, and when we are eating more whole foods and more protein has a higher thermic effect. It helps raise like our calorie burn, which is kind of cool.
yeah, and it's one of those just conceptually. So if your options are, if you want to change the amount of calories that you're burning and creating a deficit by about 5 to 10%. You can do that either by going to the gym and being very active and spending a long time trying to burn calories, or you could change what you're eating to the point where your body has to work harder to digest it. And especially if you combine the two, getting toned and losing weight is inevitable. Like those are great ways over long term to make those changes.
Yes, I have another like visual to tell you about that, but I'll figure the last part of the pie, which is NEAT, your NEAT, which stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So it is just like your movement throughout the day. It's been getting a lot more recognition these days, which is like walking or getting your steps in. Like that's what people are, that's what they're saying. I got to get my steps in. And that is just basically like you're moving more and you're not, just sitting down on the couch all day. So walking, I guess, could, it's technically kind of exercise, but when we are dedicating a little bit more movement, it's very low impact. So it really can contribute again to another area of caloric burn that isn't like run yourself to the ground trying to burn a bunch of calories. So low impact, just movement. I use my pedometer feature on my Apple Watch, and I just try to get at least like 8,000 steps. So just moving around. That's where like parking further away from the grocery store, little bits of that like add up. Just a little bit more movement throughout the day. So back to my visual. I think of like someone standing right outside their house and like with some bug spray and like spraying every single ant that comes like anywhere close to their house. And they're just running all day. They're outside. They're in the hot sun, maybe spraying every little thing. But there's an easier way, pest control. And when you're focusing on these other things, not just that burn, you're focusing on like eating more whole foods so you can increase your thermic effect. You're focusing on building more muscle so that you can have a higher rate of burn at rest. Then you're just like in your home, like living your life, and you're not like chasing after every little pest that comes your way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep, absolutely. So just taking care, looking at this from just a very holistic standpoint as a person, let's zoom out. Instead of saying, I need to burn this many calories on a treadmill 5 times a week, you can zoom back out and say, let's focus on stress and diet and healthy exercise and, getting my steps in, all this other stuff, just to shape who you are as a person so that you make better decisions, stay more active. That's great. I love that.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
Awesome.
You want to be a macro coach?
I don't know. That'd have to be the already working days, occasional nights, weekends. We'll see.
Seriously, you don't need any more.
Got to do more too. We'll got to take care of mama and baby.
Yes.
So this feels like a good point to take a step back and move over to part 2. So we're going to go over. If you're listening to this as either pre-op or getting fit post-op or just getting fit in general, specifically for people who have either had surgery, going to have surgery, or in that 6+ week post-op recovery where it's time to start getting active again, we're going to go over breast surgery and chest exercises that you can do, do's and don'ts for easing yourself back into that. Tummy tucks, lipo core exercises, how to really re-engage your core to get the most out of your tummy tuck and the best possible outcomes there. Arm lift, leg lift, safely getting back to make sure that you are working within scar protocols, getting things nice and stretched from a scar standpoint, softer, meanwhile toning muscles and trimming up. And then just in general, if you are more of a cardio person, you want to do cardio, general weight training, and you've had any surgery over here with us, let's talk through some of that stuff too. So we will take a break from here, and then we'll attach a series of short clip videos where we'll break into each of those segments that you guys can enjoy the expertise of Amelia Friend with Friendly Muscles walking us through those exercises.
Looking forward to that. It's going to be fun.
Awesome. All right. Well, you have a great rest of the day, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.